The Cleveland Browns just made a move that has sent shockwaves through the entire NFL. And John Harbaugh, the legendary Super Bowl-winning coach who was just shockingly fired by the Baltimore Ravens after 18 seasons, is now the hottest name in football. Within 45 minutes of his firing being announced, 7 different NFL teams called his agent, including one team that doesn't even have a vacancy yet, willing to fire their current coach just for a chance to land Harbaugh. And now, in a stunning development, the Browns have officially reached out to set up an interview with the man who terrorized them for nearly 2 decades from the opposing sideline. This isn't just any coaching hire. This is the Cleveland Browns potentially bringing in the architect of their biggest rival's success to finally end their 25-year championship drought. But here's the twist. Harbaugh is demanding $20 million per year, total roster control, and the power to hand-pick his own general manager. Is Cleveland willing to pay the price? Before we dive into why John Harbaugh has emerged as the top candidate for the Browns job, what his astronomical demands are, and why this hire could either save the franchise or blow up in spectacular fashion, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications because this coaching carousel is spinning out of control, and you don't want to miss a single update as one of the NFL's most respected coaches decides his next destination.
Let's set the stage for what might be the most consequential coaching hire in Cleveland Browns history. Because to understand the magnitude of this moment, you need to understand the absolute chaos that brought us here. It all started on Tuesday, January 6, 2026, when the Baltimore Ravens, in one of the most stunning moves in recent NFL memory, fired John Harbaugh after 18 seasons as their head coach. 18 seasons, 180 wins, 13 playoff victories, a Super Bowl championship, 8 road playoff wins, the most in NFL postseason history, and they just let him go. The Ravens had just lost a heartbreaking Week 18 game to the Pittsburgh Steelers on a missed field goal as time expired, a loss that kept them out of the playoffs for the first time since 2022. Ravens owner Steve Bisciotti released a statement calling it an incredibly difficult decision and praising Harbaugh as a great man of integrity with a Hall of Fame coaching career. But the subtext was clear. The Ravens had to choose between their superstar quarterback Lamar Jackson and their legendary coach, and they chose Jackson. Jackson, a 2-time NFL MVP who just turned 30, reportedly wanted more control over offensive play calling and personnel decisions, and the friction between him and Harbaugh had reached a breaking point. So Baltimore made the call, and just like that, the most sought-after coach in the 2026 NFL coaching carousel became available. Within 45 minutes of the announcement, Harbaugh's agent, Brian Harlan, received calls from 7 different NFL teams expressing interest. 7 teams! And here's the kicker. There were only 6 teams with official head coaching vacancies at the time. That means one team was willing to fire their current coach mid-cycle just for a shot at landing Harbaugh. That's the kind of demand we're talking about here. This isn't just a hot coaching candidate. This is a generational coaching talent who instantly became the #1 prize in the entire NFL. Fast forward to Saturday, January 10th, 2026, and ESPN's Diana Russini dropped a bombshell. The Cleveland Browns have officially contacted John Harbaugh's representation to set up an interview for their open head coaching position. The Browns, who fired Kevin Stefanski just days earlier after a disastrous 5-12 season, are now in the mix for the man who built the Ravens into a perennial playoff contender and dominated the AFC North for nearly 2 decades. Think about the irony here. John Harbaugh coached against the Browns 36 times over 18 years, going 25-11 against them. He developed Joe Flacco into a Super Bowl MVP. He turned Lamar Jackson into a 2-time league MVP. He built one of the most consistent winning cultures in the NFL. And now, the Browns, the team he beat relentlessly for almost 2 decades, want him to do the same thing in Cleveland. But this isn't going to be easy. Not even close, because John Harbaugh isn't just taking the first job offer that comes his way. According to Tony Grossi of ESPN Cleveland, who cited a league insider, Harbaugh has laid out what Grossi called the prerequisites for him to even be interested in any of the open jobs, and they are absolutely staggering. First, Harbaugh is demanding a $20 million annual salary. That would make him one of the highest-paid coaches in NFL history, potentially eclipsing Bill Belichick's reported $18 million per year during his peak in New England. Second, Harbaugh wants an additional $10 million per year for his coaching staff, ensuring he can bring in elite coordinators and position coaches. Third, and this is the big one, Harbaugh wants final say on all personnel decisions. That means total roster control, the authority to make every major decision on drafting, free agency, trades, and cuts. And fourth, Harbaugh wants the ability to install a general manager of his choosing, someone who would essentially work for him rather than the other way around.
Let that sink in. Harbaugh is essentially saying, pay me $30 million total per year, give me complete control of the roster, let me pick the GM, and then maybe I'll consider your job. For most franchises, those demands would be a non-starter, but for the Cleveland Browns, a team that has been searching for a franchise quarterback and organizational stability since their return in 1999, this might be exactly what they need. Here's why the Browns should seriously consider meeting Harbaugh's demands, even if they seem outrageous. First, Cleveland has cycled through 13 different starting quarterbacks since 2020, the most in the NFL during that span. Their quarterbacks during Kevin Stefanski's 6-year tenure ranked in the bottom 5 in total QBR, yards per attempt, and completion percentage, and they threw an NFL-high 98 interceptions. The offense has been a disaster, and Stefanski, despite winning NFL Coach of the Year twice, couldn't fix it. Harbaugh, on the other hand, has a proven track record of developing quarterbacks. He turned Joe Flacco from a first-round project into a Super Bowl champion. He molded Lamar Jackson from a raw run-first quarterback into a 2-time MVP with elite passing skills. If anyone can solve Cleveland's quarterback problem, whether it's developing Shedeur Sanders, drafting a new prospect, or maximizing what's left of Deshaun Watson, it's John Harbaugh. Second, the Browns desperately need a culture change. General Manager Andrew Berry acknowledged during his press conference on Monday that the franchise is at a crossroads. They've won just one playoff game since their return in 1999, and the fan base is beyond frustrated. Bringing in a Super Bowl winning coach with Harbaugh's pedigree would instantly change the narrative. It would signal to the locker room, the fans, and the entire league that Cleveland is serious about winning. Harbaugh commanded respect in Baltimore for 18 years, and that respect would transfer immediately to Cleveland. Players would buy in, free agents would take notice, the entire organization would have a renewed sense of purpose. Third, and this is critical, the Browns have the assets to meet Harbaugh's financial demands. Owner Jimmy Haslam is one of the wealthiest owners in the NFL, with a net worth exceeding $4 billion. Spending $20 million per year on a coach is pocket change for Haslam, especially if it means finally ending the franchise's championship drought. And remember, the Browns are already paying Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed $230 million contract, despite him being one of the worst quarterbacks in the league since arriving in Cleveland. If they're willing to light money on fire with Watson, why not invest in a coach who can actually deliver results? But here's where it gets complicated. According to Grossi's report, Harbaugh's demand for final say on personnel decisions creates a major problem for the Browns because they just retained general manager Andrew Berry. Berry was hired in 2020, the same year as Stefanski, and he's overseen some of the worst roster decisions in franchise history, including the disastrous Deshaun Watson trade. If Harbaugh gets total roster control, Berry would either have to step down, accept a diminished role, or be fired outright. And if the Browns fire Berry, it raises the question, why didn't they do that when they fired Stefanski? The optics would be messy, but if landing Harbaugh requires sacrificing Berry, Cleveland should absolutely do it. Harbaugh's track record speaks for itself. Berry's does not. Now let's talk about the competition. The Browns aren't the only team in the mix for Harbaugh. In fact, they're up against some seriously attractive options. The New York Giants are considered the favorites, with betting odds at plus 125, according to Sportsline oddsmakers. The Giants have a young, talented roster featuring quarterback Jackson Dart, running back Cam Scatabo, wide receiver Malik Neighbors, and one of the best defensive lines in football. They're in the largest media market in the country, they have ownership willing to spend, and they're a storied franchise desperate for a return to glory. If Harbaugh wants to win immediately and make a statement, the Giants make a ton of sense. The Miami Dolphins are also heavily in the mix, with odds at 400. Owner Stephen Ross is a University of Michigan alumnus and major benefactor, and he has a long-standing relationship with the Harbaugh family through John's brother Jim, who coached at Michigan from 2021 to 2023. Ross reportedly floated the name of new general manager John Eric Sullivan to Harbaugh before officially hiring him, suggesting the Dolphins have been coordinating this move behind the scenes. The appeal of living in South Florida as Harbaugh enters his mid-60s, combined with a rebuild that could position Miami to draft Texas quarterback Arch Manning in 2027, makes the Dolphins an intriguing option.
The Tennessee Titans, with odds at plus 500, have over $100 million in cap space and the #1 overall pick in quarterback Cam Ward. They're a complete rebuild, but that also means Harbaugh would have total control to shape the roster in his image. The Las Vegas Raiders, at plus 700, have the first overall pick and a blank slate for Harbaugh to build from scratch. And the Atlanta Falcons, at plus 800, have a talented roster led by running back Bijan Robinson, tight end Kyle Pitts, and wide receiver Drake London, plus a soft NFC South division that Harbaugh could win immediately. So where do the Browns fit in all of this? According to CBS Sports' Jonathan Jones, the Browns are a long shot, but they have one massive selling point: Myles Garrett. The Browns' defensive end just broke the NFL single-season sack record with 23 sacks in 2025, surpassing Michael Strahan and T.J. Watt. Garrett is a two-time Defensive Player of the Year and the most dominant defensive player in the league. Harbaugh spent 18 years coaching elite defenses in Baltimore, and the opportunity to coach a generational talent like Garrett could be very appealing. Additionally, Harbaugh has a history of developing quarterbacks, and the Browns have Shedeur Sanders, a fifth-round rookie who showed flashes of potential down the stretch. If Harbaugh believes he can develop Sanders into a franchise quarterback, Cleveland becomes a much more attractive option. But there's a flip side. According to Jones' sources, some coaching candidates with options may not have the Browns high on their list because of concerns about both the quarterback situation and the front office's track record. The Deshaun Watson contract is an albatross. The offensive line is aging and needs significant investment. The wide receiver core is one of the worst in the league. And despite general manager Andrew Berry promising significant investment in the offense this offseason, the Browns have a history of failed promises and missed opportunities. If Harbaugh interviews with Cleveland and doesn't feel confident that ownership will give him the resources he needs to succeed, he'll walk away without hesitation. And that brings us to the timeline. ESPN reported on Saturday that Harbaugh will only interview with a select number of clubs and that he gets to control the entire process, including who will be his general manager. Harbaugh didn't take any interviews immediately after being fired, choosing instead to spend time with his family and process the whirlwind of the past week. His brother, Jim, the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers, publicly predicted that John would be coaching in the NFL in 2026, saying he just hopes it's in the NFC so they don't have to face each other. That suggests John is serious about returning to coaching, but he's going to be selective. The Browns, meanwhile, are moving quickly. They've already interviewed Ravens offensive coordinator Todd Monken, who was Stefanski's offensive coordinator in Cleveland in 2022 to 2023, before leaving for Baltimore. They're also expected to interview several other candidates, including Chiefs offensive coordinator Matt Nagy, Bills offensive coordinator Joe Brady, and potentially former Falcons head coach Raheem Morris. But if Harbaugh is willing to meet with them, all those other interviews become secondary. Harbaugh is the prize, and everyone else is just a backup plan. So what is the odds the Browns actually land Harbaugh? It's hard to say. On one hand, Cleveland has the money, the defensive star power in Myles Garrett, and a desperate need for organizational stability. On the other hand, they have a terrible quarterback situation, a bloated Watson contract, a questionable front office, and stiff competition from more attractive markets like New York, Miami, and Atlanta. If I had to guess, I'd say the Browns are a dark horse, possible but unlikely. Harbaugh is going to prioritize a situation where he has total control, a clear path to success, and ownership that will let him build the franchise his way. Cleveland can offer him that, but so can several other teams, and those teams don't have the baggage that comes with the Browns' recent history.
But here's the thing. John Harbaugh loves a challenge. He took over a Ravens team in 2008 that was coming off a disappointing season and immediately turned them into a playoff contender. He won a Super Bowl in his 5th year, despite being doubted at every turn. He navigated organizational upheaval, quarterback controversies, and countless roster changes, and he still posted a 180-113 regular season record, good for the 4th best in the NFL during his tenure. If there's any coach in the league who could walk into the Browns' mess and turn it around, it's Harbaugh. And that's why this story is so captivating. The Cleveland Browns, a franchise defined by failure and heartbreak for 25 years, have a legitimate shot at hiring one of the greatest coaches of this generation. John Harbaugh could be the man who finally delivers a championship to Cleveland, who develops Shedeur Sanders into a franchise quarterback, who maximizes Myles Garrett's prime, and who changes the entire trajectory of the organization. Or he could take his talents elsewhere, leaving the Browns to settle for a lesser candidate and continue their cycle of mediocrity. The next few days and weeks will be critical. Harbaugh is expected to begin interviewing with teams soon, and once those meetings start, decisions will be made quickly. The Browns need to make their pitch, lay out their vision, and convince Harbaugh that Cleveland, despite all its flaws, is the right place for him. They need to show him that they're willing to meet his demands, that they'll give him the resources and autonomy he needs, and that they're committed to winning at the highest level. So, where does this leave us? John Harbaugh has emerged as the top head coaching candidate in the 2026 NFL coaching carousel, and the Cleveland Browns have officially entered the race to land him. With astronomical demands of $20 million per year, total roster control, and the power to choose his own general manager, Harbaugh is setting the bar high. Whether the Browns are willing to meet those demands remains to be seen, but one thing is certain. This decision will define the franchise for years to come. Will they land the legendary coach and finally end their championship drought? Or will they miss out on Harbaugh and settle for a lesser option? Only time will tell. As always, this information is based on reports, insider sources, and ongoing developments. The coaching search is fluid, and situations can change rapidly. We'll continue to monitor the story closely and bring you updates as they happen.